Sir, this elevator's for executives only. Julian Hardwick didn't even glance down, just tapped the silver button again, adjusting the cuff of his tailored blazer. And yet somehow, it smells like bleach and failure. Marcus Bell didn't flinch. He stood silently beside his cleaning cart, one hand resting on the mop like a cane of patience. That's the smell of your server closet. You'll get used to it. Julian turned slightly, just enough to raise a brow. Excuse me? But the elevator dinged open. Marcus stepped aside, motioned him in. Didn't say another word. Drop a like if you've ever wanted to stand up to unreasonable rules like this, and subscribe to see how this strategy plays out. This is the story of the single dad janitor they laughed at for buying $5 shoes until he cashed a check that made the CEO gasp out loud. Marcus Bell didn't dress like the other parents, not even close. He wore a faded work shirt with the school's logo and a name tag that no one read. His daughter, Dahlia, clutched a paper bag lunch and wore her new shoes, if you called $5 clearance shoes new. She didn't complain, but she did look down a lot. That was enough. "Daddy, is it okay if I eat in the library today?" she whispered. He smiled. "Only if you save me one of those chocolate chip cookies." She grinned, then hurried through the student doors. Marcus stayed outside, quietly organizing his supplies. In his periphery, luxury cars rolled through the loop like a parade of privilege. Chrome, leather, and logo after logo. One idled longer than the rest. Julian Hardwick's Jaguar. Inside, Julian sat with his son, who was busy mocking something on his phone. Julian laughed a second too loudly. "See that?" he said to the boy, nodding toward Dahlia's shoes. "You can always tell who doesn't belong." The boy chuckled. The windows were up. They didn't think he'd hear, but Marcus had sharp ears. Military ears. Ones that still twitched at quiet insults and tactical mistakes. He said nothing. Just wheeled his cart slowly toward the gym entrance, humming softly as he passed the security camera that always worked, because he made sure it did. The school didn't care who Marcus used to be. They only cared that the floor shined and the trash bins didn't overflow. So he let them underestimate him. It was easier that way. In the basement custodial room, surrounded by mops and spare light bulbs, he opened a metal lockbox. Inside were a few clippings, old service medals, a clearance badge with his younger face, and one crumpled newspaper headline from a decade ago. Pentagon breach averted. Unknown engineer called unbreakable. He folded it back into the box. Then he returned to polishing the hall Julian had just strutted through, the one lined with portraits of board members who would soon need his help more than they knew. But for now, they were just suits on a wall. Julian Hardwick stormed down the executive hallway, flanked by two assistant heads. "Why is the AV down again?" he barked. "I'm not walking into another fundraiser with a dead projector." "I'll check with Maya," one replied nervously. "You'll do more than check." "This is the third outage this month. I'm paying for flawless execution, not public school-level chaos." Marcus stepped aside silently, holding the door open for them to pass. Julian didn't acknowledge him, just kept walking, voice echoing like he owned the walls. But as the group passed, one assistant glanced back, briefly, as if she wasn't sure. Marcus looked up. They locked eyes for a half-second. Then the door shut behind her. The staff break room was quiet. Marcus ate alone, always did. Instant noodles, an apple, black coffee in a travel mug worn down by years. He scrolled through a feed of open-source encryption vulnerabilities. His old world, still spinning without him. Every so often, a post would pop up from a name he hadn't seen in years. People who used to call him Sir. They wouldn't recognize him now. He heard laughter from the faculty wing. Someone joked about cheap shoes at a rich school. He didn't look up. He simply leaned back, sipped his coffee, and ran his fingers slowly over the faded keychain on his belt loop. A gift from Dahlia. Plastic. Misspelled. It read, Best Data Dad. Some men crave legacy on paper. Marcus craved it in peace, in letting his daughter walk into a room without shame, in giving her enough without needing to prove anything. But Julian had already crossed that line, mocked a child without knowing her story, or her father's reach. "Where are you watching from?" Marcus whispered under his breath, almost to himself, because this wasn't a story about a janitor. It was a story about a man who used to guard the systems that guarded empires, until one CEO made the mistake of thinking the man pushing a mop was someone disposable. Julian Hardwick had no idea yet, but he just mocked the wrong father. The tile near the executive wing always gleamed, not because anyone cared, but because Marcus made sure it did. The hallway smelled of polish, lemon cleaner, and faint cologne. Julian Hardwick's signature scent too strong for the hour. Marcus moved methodically, mop in hand, head down. His back ached, but not from the work. He was used to work. What gnawed at him was memory. The things he'd built. The systems that would have never let men like Julian get this arrogant. Footsteps echoed. Two tone-heavy brogues clicked across the hallway, followed by hurried flats. Julian again, barking into a phone. "I don't care how much it costs. Get someone from Connexus or I'll rip the whole team out by next quarter." His assistant trailed behind, murmuring, "Sir, Connexus is booked." Maya says. "Maya says?" Julian snapped, pivoting hard. "Maya says a lot of things, like how her system's secure. Guess what? I have donors texting me that they can't even RSVP." He stopped mid-stride when he noticed Marcus nearby. Julian didn't say a word, just lowered the phone slightly and walked around him, as if dodging a trash can that had dared to stand upright. Marcus stayed quiet. It was easy. He'd been invisible for years. Down in the service wing, a soft knock came on the custodial room door. It creaked open, revealing Maya Trent, her ID lanyard twisted, face pinched in stress. "Hey," she said awkwardly. "Sorry to bug. One of your guys said you fixed the projector last week?" Marcus nodded without looking up. He was repairing a leaking utility cart valve with a pocket multi-tool. "I didn't report it," he said simply. "Right. No worries, We've had 3 outages, and Julian's about to lose his mind. Think you can show me what you did?" Marcus stood slowly, wiped his hands on a rag. "Sure." He didn't offer more. Maya led him down the tech corridor, past buzzing routers and cheap security cams. Her tablet screen kept flickering. She cursed under her breath, smacking the side. "You know," she muttered, "when I took this job, I thought I'd be working with a team. Instead, I'm playing whack-a-mole with failing firmware and a CEO who thinks I'm an idiot." Marcus made a sound like a half-smile. "Firmware's easier." "It doesn't lie to your face," Maya shot him a look. Half surprise, half reluctant agreement. They stopped at the server-adjacent AV closet. Wires were strung like spaghetti, ports blinking out of sync, one switch unit audibly clicking, a sign of a bad loop. Maya crouched, trying to trace one of the cables. "I swear it's like the last guy didn't believe in labeling anything." "Look at this. Half these lines shouldn't even be routed through." "Port 7's rerouting outbound traffic through a debug line," Marcus said quietly. Maya blinked. "Sorry?" He stepped forward. "Port 7, that's your bottleneck. It's sending out dummy packets, probably to a sandbox node. Debug mode got left on." She looked at him like he'd just spoken a different language. How would you know that?" He didn't answer, just unplugged the cable in question, tested the connection again. The clicking stopped. Screens on the far wall reloaded in sequence, clean, normal. Maya stared. "You're not just the janitor, are you?" Marcus picked up a fallen zip tie and calmly tucked it onto a wall hook. I clean what breaks. Doesn't matter where the mess is upstairs. Julian stood before the board in the conference room, gesturing at a projection screen filled with half-loaded graphs. This, he said, tapping the screen, is what failure looks like. We are the #1 prep academy in the district, and I won't have us looking like we're held together with duct tape and interns. A few board members exchanged glances. The head of finance cleared her throat. Julian, Maya's doing her best. Tech issues happen. Julian scoffed. Not when you're paid not to let them. That same moment, the projection flickered, then stabilized. Every data graph loaded cleanly, attendance logs, donor dashboards, RSVP systems, perfect. Julian blinked. What did she just... Back in the server room, Maya crossed her arms. You weren't just guessing. You saw it? Pattern recognition? Marcus nodded once. She squinted at him. So, what did you used to do? He paused, debated. Then, used to write things to keep foreign hands out of sensitive places. Patterns don't change much, just the uniforms do. That hung in the air between them. Maya leaned against the server rack. I won't tell anyone. I didn't ask you to. Still, he saw the look on her face, the shifting lines between dismissal and respect, the start of seeing someone differently. Maya checked her watch. I've got to go up and pretend I'm the hero. You are? Marcus said quietly, wiping his hands again. I just clean the floors. She smiled. It was small, but real. Then, she was gone. And Marcus was alone again, surrounded by blinking lights, humming fans, and systems that never forgot who built them. The hallway leading to the school auditorium smelled like fresh paint and prestige. Parents walked past in tailored coats, some with designer handbags, others carrying donations wrapped in glossy ribbons. A banner read, Belgrave Academy Annual Fundraiser and Community Pledge Drive. Everything gleamed, from the polished wood floors to the wine glasses clinking at the refreshment table. Marcus stood near the folding table lined with second-hand uniforms and contribution items, sorting through what remained. The donation station wasn't meant for people like him. It was a gesture, an accessory of generosity, not a lifeline. But Dahlia needed shoes, and he'd seen them tucked beneath the rack earlier that morning, slightly scuffed but solid. Size 4. He picked them up, checked the soles. $5. He reached for his wallet. Sir, came a polite voice, too crisp to be sincere. That table's for donation recipients. Marcus looked up at a volunteer mom wearing a pearl necklace and a badge labeled Event Chair. Her smile didn't touch her eyes. I know, he replied evenly. I'm buying them. My daughter's in Mrs. Lang's class. The woman hesitated, looked him up and down, then looked at the shoes, then at the cleaning badge still clipped to his shirt pocket. Oh, she said. Just that. Oh. He handed her a $5 bill, folded neatly. She didn't offer a bag. Just turned, logged the transaction with a flick of her pen, and moved on. Marcus took the shoes and stepped aside, out of view. Across the auditorium, Julian Hardwick stood near the catering table, sipping sparkling water, charming a group of donors with his standard grin. You'll meet families here from all over, he said smoothly. Of course, we maintain a very careful admissions balance. You'll find our school is inclusive, but curated laughter. Julian scanned the room, his eyes landing on Marcus for just a second too long. Then he noticed the shoes in Marcus's hand. His smile sharpened. See that? Julian said, lowering his voice and nodding subtly. Clearance shoes at a pledge drive. Always one more laughter, casual, quiet, but loud enough. Marcus heard it. So did Dahlia, who just walked in from the hallway, still holding her reading award ribbon. She paused mid-step, her eyes catching the tail end of her father's glance and the way the group was looking at him. She didn't say anything, but she clutched the ribbon tighter. Marcus knelt down and offered her the shoes. Try these? She didn't ask if they were new, just slipped them on, heel to toe. They fit snug. She nodded, then smiled. I like them. He smiled back. Me too. Julian moved toward the podium as the lights dimmed. Thank you all for coming, he began, voice amplified across the auditorium. Belgrave Academy continues to thrive because of your generosity and your taste. Tonight, we celebrate both. He continued speaking, but Marcus had tuned him out. He was at the back now, mop handle in one hand, watching Dahlia take her seat near the front with the other award winners. She sat between two girls in glossy patent leather flats. One of them whispered something. Dahlia kept her eyes forward. The speeches dragged on. Eventually, a staff member approached Marcus. Hey, the AV's working again, but the side mic's crackling. Any chance you... I'll take a look. He moved through the side aisle, past families with wine glasses and programs, past polished shoes and perfume. The AV rack was backstage, hidden from the spotlight. One cable. That's all it took. He adjusted the input gain, twisted a connector into place. The crackle disappeared. As he worked, he heard Julian behind the curtain practicing another speech. This one about technology upgrades and legacy building. We're already in talks with 2 firms about digitizing the student archive. Honestly, I don't trust the current setup. We've had outages, and I keep saying we need pros, not patchwork. Marcus said nothing, just stood up, wiped his hands on a cloth, and returned to the back wall before Julian took the stage again. After the ceremony, parents swarmed the refreshments. Children showed off awards and certificates. Marcus hung back near the doorway, letting the room breathe around him. Dahlia returned with a cookie and a smile, her ribbon crumpled a little at the corner. I got chocolate chip, she said proudly. He crouched down. That's my girl. Julian passed them again on his way out, this time with a new crowd around him. He stopped, briefly, turning as if to say something. Then he looked at Dahlia's shoes, those $5 clearance soles, and smirked. Cute, he said, too casually. Nice to see we're all contributing. He didn't wait for a response, just walked out, laughter rippling behind him. Marcus stood slowly. He didn't respond. Not yet. But he memorized that laugh, stored it somewhere cold and quiet. There would come a time when it wouldn't echo anymore. The school's main hallway always felt colder after hours, quiet, polished, clinical. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Marcus wiped down the last set of glass doors near the administrative wing. It was parent-teacher conference day, and the whole building carried the tension of grades being read, futures being hinted at, judgments politely wrapped in educational lingo. Marcus hadn't planned to attend, but Dahlia's teacher, Mrs. Lang, had asked if he could spare 5 minutes, just to talk about her reading habits and some social dynamics worth addressing. That was her way of saying the other kids were noticing more than her ribbon. He wiped his hands and adjusted his shirt, then made his way toward the conference hallway, shoes silent against the floor he'd polished earlier that morning. A folding table sat outside the double doors, with a check-in sheet. A young woman in business casual looked up from her clipboard as he approached. I'm here for Dahlia Bell, Marcus said. She glanced at his badge, still clipped to his pocket. Oh, are you on the cleaning staff? He nodded once. Yes, and I'm her father. Her smile twitched, confused. Right. It's just, parent meetings are scheduled today. Staff has to wait until after I was invited by her teacher. I understand, but we have policies about hallway traffic during sessions. Marcus stood still, not confrontational, just there. The woman hesitated, then flipped through the papers. I don't see your name listed. Sorry, sir. He could have pushed, could have asked her to check again. But he didn't. He simply stepped back, nodded once, and moved to the side wall near the bench, sat down. waited. Inside the conference room, Dahlia sat beside her teacher, quietly coloring while Mrs. Lang met with the family of another student. The girl's parents complimented her vocabulary growth, compared extracurricular schedules, and dropped not-so-subtle hints about being surrounded by ambition. Dahlia said nothing. She didn't look up, just kept coloring in a page from a puzzle book her dad had given her, A Dragon in a Castle. She liked dragons, especially ones that guarded something. Back in the hallway, Marcus watched as a father in a suit walked past, greeted by name. A mother with a coach bag received a warm wave and an escort inside. A couple in matching fleece jackets laughed with a teacher who offered them bottled water and a tour. No one looked at Marcus. Eventually, the door opened, and Mrs. Lang peeked out. Her expression shifted when she saw him still sitting there. "Mr. Bell?" she said, startled. "You didn't come in." "I wasn't on the list." She blinked. "That's ridiculous. Come in, please." The clipboard woman looked uncertain but said nothing as he passed. Inside, the conference room smelled faintly of dry erase markers and worn carpeting. A laminated banner on the wall read, "Every child belongs." The irony clung to the ceiling tiles. Mrs. Lang gestured toward the desk. Dahlia smiled softly from her seat, then glanced down again. Marcus nodded to her, then turned toward the teacher. "She's quiet," Mrs. Lang began gently, "but focused. Reads above grade level, absorbs detail, and doesn't interrupt. She's doing very well academically." He nodded, waiting for the rest. "But I did want to mention—" Mrs. Lang glanced at Dahlia, then lowered her voice. "There's been some teasing about her clothes, her shoes, one or two comments in art class that made her shrink a bit." Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. "By students?" "Yes. Not constant, but enough to notice. Kids don't always mean harm, but—" She paused. "It affects how they see themselves." Dahlia looked up then, as if she'd felt the weight in the air. "I told them I like my shoes," she said, voice quiet but steady. Marcus smiled gently. "I like them too." Mrs. Lang looked between them. "She's incredibly mature. But sometimes maturity comes from needing to defend what shouldn't need defending." Marcus didn't answer that. He didn't need to. Back in the hallway, the clipboard woman avoided his eyes as they walked past. Dahlia held his hand tightly. At the door, she stopped, looked up. "Do you think I'll always feel like this?" He crouched beside her. "No," he said softly. "One day they'll forget what they said. But they'll remember how you stood." She nodded, thoughtful. Then she handed him the coloring page, half finished, dragon still blank. "For your locker." He took it carefully, folded it into his pocket like a classified file. That night, after Dahlia had fallen asleep with a book across her chest, Marcus sat alone at the kitchen table. The light above flickered once, then steadied. He pulled out an old notepad, one with faded grid lines and formula scribbles along the margins. For a long moment, he just stared. Then he began writing. Not a complaint, not a memory, just code, protocol diagrams, firewall logic, access choke structures, defensive mapping for legacy systems. His handwriting had changed. Slower now, but the fire hadn't, because the world had looked at his daughter and decided she didn't belong. And Marcus Bell had once written the rules that kept nations from falling apart. Soon, he'd write again. The AV cart squeaked as it rolled into the administrative hallway, one wheel misaligned and wobbling just enough to be annoying. Marcus guided it with one hand, the other gripping a tool pouch slung at his hip. A projector had gone. Dark again. Same one as last week. Third time this month. The ticket said it was likely a loose cable, but Marcus knew better. The school's whole system was buckling under patches, half-done rewires, and hasty upgrades made by consultants who billed by the hour but thought in shortcuts. He didn't mind fixing the same problems more than once. What bothered him was that they kept pretending these were new problems. He opened the utility closet just off the conference room wing and stepped into the cramped space where the projector wiring fed into a hub above the ceiling panel. He flicked on his flashlight, climbed the step stool, and pushed up the tile. What he saw made him pause. A second cable, one that shouldn't be there, looped from the junction box to a router that wasn't listed on any of the school's official diagrams. The cable had no label, just a faint streak of blue marker on its sheath, smudged and worn. Marcus leaned in, checking the connector. It wasn't routed like an AV line. It was data, encrypted and unstable. He followed the wire with his eyes and saw the rest. A patch panel spliced into the wall cavity, zip-tied hastily, with ports blinking irregularly. Whoever installed it hadn't intended it to be permanent, but it had been here long enough to collect dust. He stepped down slowly. This wasn't about a projector. This was a back door. He wheeled the cart into the adjacent tech corridor and opened the main switch cabinet with a master key he wasn't technically authorized to have, but had duplicated out of necessity years ago. Inside, the routing table looked normal, but now he knew what to look for. 3 ports blinking out of pattern, packet loopback signs, debug logging on when it shouldn't be. The hall camera feed had dropped frames, timestamp misalignment. They were compromised. Not just in one server, system-wide. Upstairs, Maya was in the IT office, arguing on speakerphone with a contracted technician. "I've told you twice," she said sharply. "The donor RSVP system is stalling on back-end confirmation. If this screws up the gala headcount, Julian will have my badge pinned to his whiskey." The voice on the phone crackled. "We ran diagnostics last week. No issues showed up. Could be your local cache." "It's not the cache." Marcus knocked once on the doorframe. Maya looked up, eyebrows raised. "Problem?" "Need 5 minutes," Marcus said quietly. "Server side." She blinked. "Why?" He stepped in and set a small device on the desk, a packet sniffer, one he'd built from spare parts, housing it in a used Ethernet tester shell. "Because someone's tunneling system access through a buried debug port," he said, "and they've been doing it under your nose for months." Maya's face froze. "That's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation. It's a trace log." He tapped the device. The display lit up, showing 2 data streams bleeding across secure partitions. Maya's breath hitched. She stepped around, scanning the logs. "Where the hell did you—" "I built it." He didn't say when, or for who, or why. She studied the readings, cross-checked the port IDs. Her voice dropped. "This is coming through the old admin backup node. That should have been locked down 2 years ago." "It wasn't." "Who knew it existed?" Marcus just looked at her. She understood the silence. They traced the tunnel together, walking through back corridors Marcus knew better than the blueprints, past the unused computer lab, through a panel door that led behind the AV station. Maya's phone kept pinging, Julian, trying to get her attention, but she ignored it. When they reached the patch panel, Maya crouched and stared at the setup, stunned. This is bad." Marcus nodded. "Donor data, staff IDs, possibly even payroll." Maya's eyes darkened. "And student records? They're not exfiltrating yet, but someone's watching, mapping vulnerabilities. They'll breach it when they know where it hurts." Maya stood slowly. "How did you know where to look?" He hesitated, then, "Because I used to build systems that couldn't afford to fail." Her expression shifted. Something old school in her tech mind clicked into place. "You're not just handy." "No." "You were military?" Marcus gave a half nod. "Something close." She looked at him longer this time. Really looked. The janitor uniform, the worn shoes, the mop cart with wires tucked between disinfectant bottles, and the man who could read packet logs like poetry. Back in her office, she pulled up the central diagnostic dashboard and began testing segments. "You know what this means, right?" she said. Marcus nodded. "It's not just sabotage. It's liability. If this leaks during audit week, the board buries it, and probably you." Maya exhaled hard. "Julian will throw me under the bus before the first press release." "You still want to tell him?" She glanced at him. "You have a better idea?" He picked up the sniffer. "I fix things?" Quietly. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "You might want to check the RSVP system. Some of those emails are fake accounts." She whipped her head toward him. "You saw that too?" He looked over his shoulder as he walked out the door. "I see everything that leaves this building." Maya Trent didn't sleep that night. She sat in the IT office long after the cleaning crew left, fingers racing across her keyboard, cross-referencing logs, comparing access times. What Marcus had found wasn't just bad wiring or lazy oversight. It was a backdoor carved into the school's most sensitive systems. Hidden, quiet, intentional. It made her stomach turn. She checked the central security console again. There it was. Access activity timestamped for 2:13 a.m. last Thursday. Someone had entered through the debug port Marcus exposed. The user ID, a ghost. No name, no alias, no device registration. A ghost that didn't belong in a school system. And it had root privileges. She rubbed her temples and reached for her thermos. Cold coffee. No time for anything else. The hallway outside was empty, except for the sound of a mop bucket rolling. Marcus moved like he always did. Steady, invisible, quiet. But tonight he didn't polish floors. He checked access panels, listened for humming wall units, noted the faint heat blooming behind drywall, evidence of overheating routers from stress tests someone else had triggered. He was hunting. Not for the breach. He'd already found that. He was hunting for the person who put it there. Maya found him near the library junction, crouched behind a rolling whiteboard. "You still working?" she asked. "Are you?" She sighed. "I found at least 6 spoofed parent accounts in the donor RSVP system, most tied to the same IP range. All routed through the compromised node." Marcus nodded. "That's not just surveillance? That's staging. Staging for what?" He looked at the ceiling. "For a breach big enough to make Julian wish he'd never heard of cybersecurity." She leaned against the wall. "Do you think it's internal?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Why?" "Because someone had physical access. You don't bury a tunnel like that from outside. You do it when you think no one's looking, and you don't risk exposure unless the payoff's personal." Maya frowned. "So who?" Marcus stood slowly. "We'll find out, but not by asking." She studied him, then said quietly, "You're not just good at this. You're trained." He didn't deny it. She pulled her tablet from her bag and tapped open a restricted admin log. "You want to see something weird?" He glanced at the screen. It showed a successful override of the school's firewall failsafe. Timestamp 2 weeks ago. Flagged, but never escalated. "Julian didn't report that?" Maya shook her head. "He had access. I think he cleared the alert manually." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Why would a CEO be in the admin logs?" She answered with silence. They both knew what that meant. The next morning, Julian stormed into the IT wing. His usual polished calm swapped for irritation. He slammed a tablet onto Maya's desk. "Why are the RSVP confirmations duplicating?" he demanded. "I had a parent call and say they received 4 separate emails, all from different accounts. Fix it." Maya calmly turned the tablet around and pulled up the source. "Because they're not duplicates," she said coolly. "They're spoofed." And someone's been injecting synthetic entries through the debug port, the same one that shouldn't exist. Julian's expression flickered. I'm sorry, the what? You heard me. There's a hardwired tunnel in our network, and it's been active for weeks. He folded his arms. Why am I just hearing about this now? Because I just confirmed it, she lied. Julian exhaled sharply. Well, fix it. Hire someone if you have to. I did. Julian froze. What? She turned toward the hallway. Marcus stepped through the door, holding a binder and a small circuit diagram sketched in pencil. Julian's eyes narrowed. You? Marcus met his gaze. We've met. Julian looked at Maya like she'd lost her mind. You're letting a janitor identify the exact location of the breach before it goes public? Yes, she said, cutting him off. Julian's jaw clenched. This is a security issue. You don't let staff interfere? Marcus laid the diagram on the desk, without a word. It showed the compromised routing, the tunnel, the staged entry points, and the synthetic RSVP accounts, each one mapped and labeled. Julian stared at it, then at him. What? What is this? Marcus tapped the corner of the page. That's your donor database, or it was. Whoever did this knew exactly where to hit first: funding, faculty IDs, and parent contacts. If you hadn't noticed yet, that's the soft underbelly of your entire operation. Julian's voice cracked slightly. How do you know that? Marcus looked him dead in the eye. Because I used to write systems that made this kind of breach impossible. The silence between them was sharp. Julian straightened, trying to salvage control. You'll hand this to me and I'll take it from here. No, Marcus replied. What do you mean, no? I mean you can't handle what's coming. But I can, Julian blinked. And why would I trust you? You won't, Marcus said flatly. But by the time this is over, you'll wish you had sooner. He turned and walked out, binder in hand, not bothering to wait for approval. Because approval wasn't needed, just access. And Marcus Bell already had that. The breach happened on a Thursday. It started quietly. Just a flicker in the donor tracking system. Names vanished, dollar amounts reversed. Then the student roster dropped half its entries. Suddenly, teachers were locked out of grading portals. The lunch payment system rerouted to a dead link. Parents started calling. By noon, it was clear something was very wrong. Julian paced the length of the main office, phone pressed tight against his ear, barking orders that weren't landing anywhere. Get me Connexus again. Yes, I know they said they were booked. Tell them it's an emergency. Maya stood nearby, pale but composed, monitoring the security logs from her tablet. Every time she refreshed, more red flags appeared. The source IP was bouncing, spoofed too many times to trace in real time. But the path, that was unmistakable. Same access point, she said. They're using the debug tunnel. Julian turned toward her. You said you patched that. I didn't say that, Maya replied, voice calm. I said I found it. You said we didn't have time to reroute. He opened his mouth, then shut it. Marcus entered without knocking, holding a drive in his hand and a folded note. I have the counter, he said, but you're going to need to give me full back-end access. Julian's face flushed. Absolutely not. That would be a massive liability. Marcus didn't blink. Bigger than losing your entire database to whoever's watching this unfold? The two men stared at each other, one in a tailored suit, one in a janitor's uniform with worn knees and a faint bleach stain near the pocket. Yet in that moment, it was clear who was in control. Julian looked to Maya. Is this our only option? She nodded once. Unless you want to shut down the school for the next month and risk parents pulling donations? Yes. Julian exhaled sharply. You have 1 hour. Marcus stepped past him without a word. In the server room, he moved fast. The drive held a custom watchdog program he'd written the night before. It didn't just track breach behavior, it mirrored it, creating a false trail for the attacker to follow. He slid the USB into the console, fingers dancing across the keyboard. Maya hovered behind him, watching. "You built this?" she asked. "Wrote it years ago?" "Modified it last night." "How long were you in whatever job this was before?" Marcus didn't look up. "Long enough to know breaches never happen on the day you expect. They always come on the day someone in power makes a stupid decision." Her silence told him she agreed. The screen blinked. Code streamed. The dummy network activated. Marcus sat back and waited. 3 minutes later, the breach signature jumped to the false environment. "Hooked," he said. "They're poking around the sandbox now." "Should give us about 20 minutes, Maya looked at him. "What do you need next?" "Pull system logs for anyone who accessed the debug port physically in the last 90 days. "Done." She pulled the log and began scanning. Her breath caught. "There," she said, pointing. "One match." Marcus leaned in. The name on the log, Gavin R. Langston, Julian's executive assistant. Upstairs, Gavin Langston sat at his desk in the executive office suite, typing with mechanical precision. His blazer was folded neatly on the back of his chair, cufflinks still gleaming despite the afternoon chaos. On his screen was the RSVP dashboard, only it wasn't the real one. It was the mirrored sandbox. He didn't know he was being watched. Marcus entered quietly, Maya just behind him. Julian was already there, rubbing his temples, sweating. "Your assistant," Marcus said flatly. "He's the breach." Julian looked up, stunned. "Gavin?" Maya pulled up the confirmation logs. He used the debug port, manually inserted backdoor code 3 weeks ago. And look, these fake donor accounts, all created under his admin sub-ID. Gavin didn't look away from the screen, but his fingers froze. Julian stepped forward. "Gavin? What is this?" Gavin finally turned, expression unbothered. "What it looks like. Your system was wide open. I did what any logical person would do." "You betrayed the school?" Gavin smirked. "I exploited a system that exploited people like me. You ever wonder why you keep losing real talent? Why half the interns vanish after a semester? Maybe because no one here gives a damn unless you wear a Rolex?" Julian stammered, That's not." "It is," Marcus interrupted. Gavin turned to him, eyes narrowing. "And you?" "You don't belong here." "I didn't," Marcus said. "But you made a mess on my floor." "And I don't leave messes." Maya stepped forward. "We've mirrored your movements for the past hour. All of it logged, all of it traceable." "You're done?" Gavin stared at her. For the first time, his expression cracked. Then he stood. "You'll regret this." Marcus stepped into his path. "Doubt it." Gavin left, escorted moments later by a school officer. Julian stood silent, shocked. "You said 1 hour," Marcus said, turning to Maya. She nodded. "Took less." By morning, the storm had passed, at least on the surface. The breach had been isolated, the fake accounts scrubbed, and the donor database restored from the mirrored backup Marcus had deployed just in time. The official story? A minor data irregularity resolved by the IT team with no compromise of student information. Julian signed off on that statement himself, but the tension in his office was thick enough to choke on. He stood at the corner window of his office now, watching the Belgrave courtyard, where families arrived for morning drop-off, perfect cars, perfect smiles, all unaware of how close everything had come to collapse. Maya sat across the room, laptop open, quietly finishing the incident report. She wasn't speaking, not unless spoken to. She'd seen Julian in this mood before, the thin veneer of composure over raw embarrassment. Marcus stood against the back wall, arms crossed, silent. He hadn't said a word since Gavin had been escorted out the night before. He didn't need to. Julian turned slowly. "All right," he said at last, voice even but strained. "We need to clean this up, thoroughly." Before the gala, Maya didn't look up. "We already have. Every vulnerability is sealed. Every system Gavin touched has been re-imaged. The donor list is stable. And the press? There's nothing to report," Marcus said flatly. Julian's eyes flicked toward him. "And how would you know that?" "Because I didn't do this for the headlines. I did it because you let someone threaten children's records, and I'm not letting that happen." Julian bristled. "You forget your position here." "No," Marcus said. "I didn't." The air turned sharp. Even Maya stopped typing. Julian stepped forward. "You walk around this place with a mop like you own the place. Do you honestly think cleaning up a single mess gives you the right to challenge how I run my school?" "I'm not challenging how you run it," Marcus replied. "I'm correcting the damage you ignored." Julian scoffed. "You think anyone's going to thank you for this? You think these parents, these board members, people with influence, will care that some janitor wrote a few lines of code?" "Not really," Marcus said calmly. "But they'll care about what happens if you don't." Julian laughed bitterly, turning to Maya. "Is this seriously what we're doing now? Letting the help lecture us on data integrity?" Maya stared at him. "He's not the help. He's the only reason this school isn't in national headlines right now." Julian looked from her to Marcus, mouth half open. Then he shook his head, the arrogance returning like a second skin. "Fine. Play hero. Just don't expect a medal. Once this gala's over, we'll reevaluate everyone's role here." That was a threat, and everyone in the room knew it. Downstairs in the janitor's closet, Marcus pulled open a storage cabinet and retrieved a narrow metal case. It was nothing remarkable to look at, just brushed aluminum, scuffed at the edges. But inside was something much rarer, a sealed, credentialed file folder bearing the emblem of a now defunct military contractor. He hadn't opened it in years. Inside were old clearance cards, deployment photos, and faded printouts of systems architecture he had written when he was still known as Chief Systems Engineer Marcus Bell, not custodian. He stared at the credentials, not with longing, but with clarity, because it was time, not for attention, but for precision. That evening, Maya found him in the server room, watching the logs scroll silently across the main screen. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it. "You're going to reveal it, aren't you?" she asked. Marcus didn't look over. "Not for me. For Dahlia." He nodded once. She stepped forward, holding something in her hand. A badge. Not his cleaning badge. An official staff ID with his name and new title. Systems Security Advisor. "I pulled some strings with the board," she said. "They were more impressed than Julian was. You're in, full access, contracted support." For now he took the badge and turned it over in his hand. Then smiled, just slightly. "You always this persuasive?" "Only when the alternative is watching someone competent walk away." They stood in silence for a beat. Then she added, "And you might want to know, Julian's not done." "I know. He's furious you were right." He was more furious that someone beneath him outsmarted him. She tilted her head. "So what's the plan?" Marcus reached for his old credentials and slid them into the inside pocket of his jacket. Julian wanted a stage. And? Marcus smiled, eyes cold now, focused. "I'm going to give him one." The gymnasium barely resembled a school facility. By mid-afternoon, it had been transformed into a donor gala space, complete with chandelier rentals, gold-accented tableware, velvet drapes, and a temporary stage with a glossy podium emblazoned with Belgrave Academy's crest. Student artwork lined the walls in neat rows, hand-picked to showcase talent across all income levels, as the pamphlet put it. But everyone knew whose parents actually funded the jazz quartet warming up in the corner. Marcus stood near the back, dressed in a clean navy utility jacket, badge clipped visibly to his chest. System Security Advisor. It was official. No one questioned him now, not even Julian. Especially not Julian, who worked the room like a man campaigning for something, his smile tight, hands firm, always with an eye over his shoulder. He spotted Marcus once, looked away quickly. Maya approached from the main doors, tablet in hand, dressed in sleek black and moving with quiet confidence. "Everything's staged," she said. "A V's wired to your panel, press is in position, live stream toggles in 10. I even looped in 2 alumni board members as tech consultants in case Julian starts to spin." Marcus gave her a single nod. "You see him check the guest list? He triple-checked it. He thinks the superintendent and 2 tech investors are here to honor him." That made Marcus smirk. Good. Backstage, Dahlia stood nervously beside the edge curtain, tugging at the sleeves of her pressed cotton dress. She didn't like being around so many people, especially ones who looked at her the way they had in the hallways. Like she didn't belong. But tonight, she wasn't here for them. She was here for her dad. "Do you have the dragon?" Marcus asked as he crouched beside her. She nodded, pulled the crinkled coloring page from her small shoulder bag, the half-colored dragon she'd handed him outside her conference weeks ago. He gently unfolded it, smoothed the edges, then slipped it into the folder he held. He didn't explain why. She didn't ask. Julian took the stage to polite applause. "Welcome," he began, voice oiled with charm. "Tonight, we gather to celebrate Belgrave's tradition of excellence, our students' achievements, and the generous hearts that make their education possible." He paced like a man who believed in his own legend. "In an increasingly digital world," he continued, "our commitment to secure, cutting-edge systems has never been stronger. I'm proud to say Belgrave stands at the forefront of educational integrity." Maya tapped the screen. The side wall lit up. Footage played. Security cam footage, showing Gavin entering restricted server rooms. Spliced alongside it was real-time network activity from the mirrored sandbox Marcus had set up, with Gavin's credentials activating the breach. The room stilled. Julian paused, throat catching. "And as part of that commitment," he said, voice faltering, "we recently performed a system audit that led to some discoveries." More footage rolled, email trails, fake RSVP entries, all tied to Gavin, and at the bottom, a short entry log from Julian himself, accessing the debug node and manually suppressing a flag. Someone in the audience gasped. Maya stepped onto the stage. "Belgrave's integrity wasn't preserved by oversight," she said. "It was saved in spite of it, by someone few people in this room would have listened to if they saw his shoes instead of his skill." She turned. "Marcus Bell, will you join me?" He walked up calmly, binder in hand, daughter's drawing tucked into the inside flap. Julian tried to speak. "This isn't—" But Maya cut him off. "Let the room see who stopped the collapse." Marcus faced the crowd. No speech, no prepared script. He opened the binder. Inside was Dahlia's dragon. He held it up quietly. "This," he said, "is why I did it." Some people blinked. Some tilted their heads. "She drew this while other kids laughed at her shoes," he continued, "because they didn't cost enough. Because I mopped the floor. What they didn't know is I also built secure command systems for 3 federal agencies. What they didn't see is that value isn't something you wear." He turned to Julian. "And what you didn't see is the warning signs in your own network, Because you didn't know what to look for? The audience sat stunned. Julian opened his mouth, but this time, no sound came out. Because no one was listening to him anymore. Down in the crowd, a teacher who'd once walked past Marcus without a word clapped first, then another, and another, until the applause spread. Not roaring, not performative, but real. Respectful. Julian left the stage without speaking. Later, as the room emptied and the quartet packed up, Dahlia stood at the edge of the now dimmed lights, watching her father quietly close the binder. "Did you win?" she asked. Marcus looked at her. "No," he said gently. "We did." He handed her the drawing. She smiled, then whispered, "I think the dragon's done now." He smiled back. "Yeah," he said. "I think so too." Julian didn't return to campus the next morning. His office remained locked, blinds drawn, the corner desk untouched. Rumors rippled through Belgrave Academy like wind through tall grass. Some claimed he'd resigned quietly, others swore he was on leave, but no one seemed to know for sure. The only real confirmation came through a terse administrative email. Effective immediately, interim leadership will be provided by the board of directors while a formal review is conducted. Maya read it twice, then once more, and still didn't smile. She knew what it really meant. The board had seen the gala footage, and they weren't about to let Julian's arrogance drag their reputation through the mud. It wasn't justice, but it was something. In the IT office, Marcus sat behind a desk that wasn't technically his, but no one questioned him. He reviewed system diagnostics, flagged weak nodes, and patched up Julian-era shortcuts one by one. No flash, no credit, just steady, quiet work. The kind you only noticed when it stopped. Maya knocked once before entering. "Hey, we just had a teacher ask if the Wi-Fi login page could have a welcome message." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Did the world end?" "Not yet." He handed her a thumb drive. "Here's the new firewall protocol. No more debug ports, no more shadow access." She took it. "You're rebuilding the whole skeleton." "Not rebuilding," he corrected. "Refining." At lunch, Marcus and Dahlia sat together in the modest courtyard behind the east wing, an area few used, mostly because it faced the maintenance sheds, but Dahlia liked it. It was quiet, and it smelled faintly of lilacs when the wind blew right. She took a bite of her sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. "Are they going to make you the boss now?" she asked. Marcus shook his head, sipping coffee from a travel mug. "Don't need to be the boss. But you fixed everything." "Not everything." She tilted her head. "Like what?" He thought for a moment. "There's still a lot of people who think being loud means being right." She scrunched her nose. "That's dumb." He smiled. "Yeah, but it's loud dumb." She giggled, then leaned against him, sandwich forgotten. "I'm glad you work here." He rested his hand on her back. "Me too." By midweek, new energy stirred in the halls. The board officially announced Maya as Director of Technology Infrastructure, a fancy title for a role she'd already been performing without recognition. They gave her full control over staffing, security policy, and systems procurement. Her first action? Appointing Marcus as lead security analyst. Official, permanent, with a salary that finally matched the weight he'd been carrying. He didn't celebrate, but Maya caught him smiling, just slightly, when the laminated badge arrived in the mail. He put it in his pocket, behind Dahlia's dragon drawing. One morning, Marcus entered the teacher's lounge carrying a small repair kit. A guidance counselor had flagged a flickering light panel. It wasn't technically his job anymore, but he never liked broken things left ignored. He climbed the short stepladder, adjusted the socket, an O-band, and secured the panel back into place. When he climbed down, he noticed a teacher watching him. Mr. Reynolds, one of the instructors who'd once joked about his shoes. "You're still fixing stuff?" Reynolds asked, uncertain. Marcus nodded. I don't stop just because the title changed. Reynolds hesitated, then said quietly, My nephew's in your daughter's class. He says she's got the best math brain he's ever seen. Marcus didn't respond immediately. Then, she likes to build things. Might be an engineer. Reynolds smiled awkwardly. Well, let me know if she needs an internship when she's older. I've got friends at TechBridge Labs. Marcus met his eyes. Thanks. The moment passed without ceremony, but something shifted. Not loud, but real. Later that afternoon, Maya knocked on the janitor's closet door, out of habit more than necessity. Marcus was inside, organizing tools. Even though he had an office now, he still kept the closet tidy. It had been his sanctuary. Still was. You still using this space? She asked, teasing. He looked up. Thought about giving it back. But I like it. She nodded. Then stepped inside, holding a sealed envelope. What's this? Board request? They want you to give a presentation at the State Charter Conference next month on crisis management and how overlooked team members can be key assets. He smirked. Sounds like a sales pitch. It is. But they want you to pitch it. He opened the envelope. Inside was a program sheet, his name listed in the keynote panel. Never thought I'd see my name printed next to CEOS again, he said softly. You didn't just stop a breach, Maya said. You rewired the way this school thinks. He held the sheet for a moment longer, then tucked it behind the dragon, drawing in his jacket. I'll go, he said. But I'm not wearing a suit. Maya grinned. Good. They've heard enough from Suits. Julian waited at the coffee shop across from the Belgrave campus, the same upscale spot he used to frequent during school hours while checking emails. Only now he sat alone, dressed not in a tailored suit, but in a slightly wrinkled sport coat and no tie. The staff still greeted him, but the warmth was gone. The nods had turned polite, performative. He glanced at his watch, impatient. Then Marcus walked in. No fanfare, no hesitation. Just a quiet entrance, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes scanning the room like he already knew where Julian would be sitting. Julian didn't stand. You came? Marcus sat across from him, sliding into the booth with that same calm presence he carried through every hallway. Julian cut straight to it. I wanted to clear the air. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Didn't know it needed clearing. Julian exhaled through his nose, visibly trying to maintain his cool. Look, I know things didn't end gracefully. And I know you feel like I tried to undermine you. You didn't try. You did? Julian bristled, then looked around to make sure no one was listening. I didn't know Gavin was going to sabotage the system. You didn't want to know, Marcus said flatly. And once it started, you ignored the signs until they were too loud to dismiss. Julian leaned forward, lowering his voice. Do you know what kind of pressure I'm under? These donors, these board and members. They don't care about janitors or back-end architecture. They care about endowments and headlines. And I've built this school into one of the top 10 charter institutions in the state. I've sacrificed everything for it, Marcus didn't flinch. That's the problem. You think it belongs to you? It doesn't? No, Marcus said. It belongs to the kids, the teachers, the people who actually give a damn about what happens when the cameras aren't rolling. Julian stared at him, silent. Marcus continued. You had the power to protect them. But you were too busy protecting yourself. Julian sat back, rubbing his temple. So what? You want an apology? I don't want anything, Marcus said. You called this meeting. Julian's jaw worked. For a moment, it looked like he might explode. But then something shifted. Weariness. I was wrong, he said, voice low. You saved us from something I never saw coming. And you did it Without asking for anything, Marcus didn't gloat. He just nodded once. Julian reached into his coat and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. I submitted this to the board. A letter of endorsement. For your permanent position, full benefits. I also waived any claim to final say on tech hiring decisions. Marcus took the paper, unfolded it, read it, then folded it again and set it on the table. Thanks, he said. Julian hesitated, then asked, Why didn't you tell anyone who you really were? Marcus looked him in the eye. Because if they only respect me because of what I was, then they'll never respect the man I am. Julian didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Marcus stood up. Before he left, he said, You were right about one thing. Julian looked up. The parents do care about headlines, but now the headline is, Belgrave's future was saved by a janitor. And that's something they'll remember longer than your donor speeches. And with that, Marcus walked out. That evening, he sat in the kitchen with Dahlia as she worked on a poster for the school science fair. She was building a model bridge, glued popsicle sticks, some string, and a printed diagram she'd drawn in colored pencil. He watched as she adjusted a crossbeam. That's not quite centered, he said gently. I know, she replied. But if I put the weight here, she tapped a point near the left base. It'll still balance. Marcus smiled. You figured that out yourself? She nodded. You said symmetry doesn't always mean strength. He leaned back, eyes softening. Smart. She looked up at him. Will you come to the fair? Wouldn't miss it. Dahlia hesitated, then added, Some of the kids, they said you were on TV. He chuckled. Not TV, just the school stream. They said you were a spy. Marcus laughed, full and deep this time. Not a spy. Just a guy who sees things people miss. She went back to coloring. I think that's cooler. He watched her for a moment longer, then rose and grabbed the folder from the table. Inside was the letter Julian had given him. He didn't need it. He already had the only title that mattered. Dad. The science fair was held in the same gymnasium that had hosted the gala just weeks before, but it felt like a different world. Instead of velvet drapes and champagne flutes, there were folding tables and trifold poster boards. Kids in oversized safety goggles demonstrated everything from baking soda volcanoes to makeshift solar panels. Parents hovered nearby, clapping proudly, even if they didn't understand what photosynthetic light efficiency meant. Dahlia stood at her booth, her popsicle stick bridge front and center, holding steady under the small bag of pennies she'd placed on top. Her poster was clean, neat, and full of real equations. Some she'd memorized, some she'd figured out with Marcus late at night, pencil smudges on her cheeks. Marcus stood just behind her, arms crossed, watching quietly. One father leaned over, squinting at the bridge. Did your dad help you build that? He asked. Dahlia didn't miss a beat. Nope. He helped me understand how to build it. The man chuckled. Sounds like he's got a smart one. Marcus smiled. She's got the brains. I'm just the assistant. The man moved on. Dahlia turned and looked up at her father. Do you think I'll win? She asked. I think you already did, he said. Later that day, after the fair had wound down and families packed up their projects, Marcus returned to his office. The desk wasn't fancy, just a matte metal frame and 2 drawers, but it had a small plant Maya had given him and Dahlia's dragon drawing framed on the wall behind it. He sat for a moment in the quiet, scrolling through the new security logs. Clean, stable. And this time, someone had noticed. He opened an email from the superintendent's office, an invitation to consult on a broader district-wide cybersecurity program, a chance to replicate the same integrity-focused model he'd helped build at Belgrave. He didn't click reply right away. Instead, he stood, walked to the window and looked out across the campus. The cracked sidewalks, the beat-up flagpole, the quiet after-school hum of kids heading home. This place had tried to bury him in silence, but he'd built his voice from the ground up, one hallway, one problem, one child at a time. That evening, Marcus and Dahlia sat together on the steps outside their apartment, sipping orange sodas and watching the city wind down. The sun dipped low, painting the sky a dusky pink. "Did you ever think," Dahlia asked, "you'd be doing this again?" He glanced at her. "Doing what?" "Wearing the badge. Running the tech stuff. Fixing everything he considered it." "No," he said honestly. "I thought that part of my life was over. But it's not." "No," he said. "It's just different now." She nodded slowly, thoughtful. "Do you like it?" He looked at her. "I like being useful." "I like building things that protect people," she smiled. "Like bridges," he grinned. "Exactly like bridges." They sat in silence for a moment longer. Then Dahlia asked, "What happens next?" He exhaled, slowly. "Next? I keep showing up. I keep fixing what's broken, and I make sure the right people never get ignored again." Because it had never been about revenge. It had never even been about proving someone wrong. It was about dignity. About showing that the man in the uniform scrubbing the floors might know more about protecting a system than the guy in the corner office ever would. That fatherhood and humility didn't erase brilliance. That a name forgotten in some database could still echo louder than applause. Julian's name would fade. Marcus Bell's would become a quiet legend. The kind whispered by teachers in break rooms and students in hallways. That's the guy who saved the school. And if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been dismissed because of where you stand, how you look, or what you earn, remember this. The person above you doesn't decide your value. It's revealed when everything falls apart. And when it does, the world always looks to the one holding it together. That person might just be you. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. Single dad janitor let the girl race his mop bucket down the hall. The billionaire mom was screaming from her limo. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?